So what had happened is I thought he was along this back edge of this field. So I ranged the trees at the back of the field, like that edge. Well, it turns out he was like 6 or 7 yards in front of it. But I didn't recognize that in the moment. It was like a fast situation. It was a slow situation. The deer was within 30 yards for like 10 minutes, but I didn't have a shot. And then all of a sudden he just like walks off. Like, and I'm thinking I'm going to have and I'm like, oh shit. Like, and I'm going and so like, like I got to get back. It just changed like that. And so I didn't recognize that, hey, he's 7 yards off that tree line. And so I shot him for the distance of the tree line. I shot right over his back. And I was like, oh, but that's a me failure, and I can work on that, right? Like my gear it's not a gear thing. It's me. I misjudged that situation, and I can live with that because that's something you can improve on. But like the gear stuff, to me, that's the easy part because you have all year to perfect that stuff. Like it's hard enough to kill these things, right? When everything is going right. Like, so eliminate all the variables that could go wrong so that it's just you in the moment executing, and that's it. Simplify it so like you don't have to worry about this other stuff. So that's how I kind of approach it.
Welcome to the Just Hunt Podcast.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Just Hunt Podcast. This is episode 19. And today we have a remote guest, John LaMarca from Woodman Arms. And John is the Director of Sales and Marketing and also the Director of Engineering. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So can you give us, I would say a fair amount of people that are listening to this are probably familiar with Woodman Arms at this point. So if you're not, it's a muzzleloader company out of New Hampshire. Make really high quality muzzleloaders. Geared towards, like, in my opinion, like the tracker, like big woods hunter, mountain hunter type thing, and super functional, just quality built. So that's the short of it. We'll get into a lot more detail than that, but just to kind of give everybody an overview. But can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into that position and what you were kind of doing before, and then like obviously we talked about your title there, but what are like the day-to-day for you at Woodman, and like what do you directly have your hands in? It sounds like probably a lot if you're a directing of marketing, sales and marketing, and engineering. Those are usually people are one or the other. Those are two big, really main responsibilities as any manufacturing company. So you have, like, I would say, your hands full. So
it's kind of funny when I first started for the engineering. Obviously, everyone was familiar with the rifle. And when I first got started, Mark, was talking about, hey, I want to, make some changes, make some upgrades, stuff like that. So we started doing that. However, I love to talk hunting like anyone, and I'm, fairly charismatic. I like talking to people, which most engineers are not that way. And I don't know if you've ever met Mark before. Mark would rather stay in the shop and not talk to people. So I was like, Mark, do you want me to like start going to places and getting the rifles in different shops and stuff like that? He's like, would you do that? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I'd do that. So it's kind of how that started. But anyway, to answer your question you had asked, my name is John LaMarca. So I'm an engineer by trade. I went to school, and then out of school, I did automation engineering. So the easiest thing to describe that is robots that put stuff together. Mm-hmm. So something that I've done that maybe many of you have had your hands on, or I should say your nose on. During COVID, most people have used one of the Abbott swab testers you put in your nose. Yep. Myself, along with a team of many, many people, built the machine that used robots to put together those kits, with robots putting stuff together, putting all that together, spit out at the end at a crazy high rate and sell to the world. Gotcha. So that's something that I have done that you may know of. But anyway, that's not fun, nor is it hunting, but that's what I did.
Is your degree in mechanical engineering? Or what is
mechanical and minor in electrical?
Okay, cool. Oh, awesome. That's perfect.
But yeah, so that's how I got started. But like many people out there working, that was not where my heart laid. I am an outdoorsman. I've always loved it. I'm actually a non-traditional hunter. No one in my family hunted, and I always, loved hunting. I grew up in Kittery, so I go to the Kittery Trading Post all the time and just look around. And this isn't exactly kosher, but a good buddy of mine and I, we would, in high school, we would go to school, and during our open campus study halls, we'd go over to Kittery Trading Post, pick up some ammo, go to the shooting range, come back, not have time to go home, so we just keep our guns in our cars and not say anything, throw a blanket over them. And but anyway, so
that used to not be a big deal, by the way. No.
Not at all. I mean,
No, I used to
that.
bring guns to school, and then because I had to leave from high school and then go hunting, I didn't want to go home, so I just bring my stuff with me. And
Right.
there's
It
no big.
makes sense. It's in your car. You're not bringing it in the building.
Yeah.
You know, guys used to have those like truck mounted gun racks, and stuff, like super common.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad said when he was in high school, they had like in the principal's office, they had a safe, and they would bring the gun into the principal's office, turn it in for the day, then when they leave, take the gun with them.
Exactly. There was a couple times that we'd go, and depending on like the shooting area we'd be at, the brass would bounce, and a couple times we'd go back to English class, and luckily our English teacher was a veteran, and my buddy, I have this distinct memory. He went over and like kind of looked over at him and reached in the hood of his hoodie and said, "You're gonna want to hide that," and he pulled brass out of it. We're like, "Uh-oh, no, that's not what you want." But yeah, so I didn't grow up hunting, but when I turned 18, I've always wanted to be a hunter, and so I basically just hit the woods with a shotgun, did everything wrong. I mean, what's kind of nice about that is, I'm a guide. I'm a guide now. I guide moose, I guide deer, I do beaver trapping, do all sorts of stuff. But I remember my very first hunt, and I remember everything that happened with it. So what's cool about that is I can look back to maybe a brand new hunter and say, this is what I did just starting, because I remember my first hunt. Whereas like my son, who's 4, he's done more hunting than most adults, and I know he doesn't remember any of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or he won't remember that. But anyway, so I got into doing engineering out of college, and I made a distinct effort and a decision that I'm not going to do automation forever. I want to work in the industry that I love. So I started working at LL Bean, which isn't too far from where I live.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons. One, because I'm an engineer, I got a job in the back of house, and I would process the returns. And I did that because I wanted to learn where the failure points of stuff was in their items. And I'd make a list of how I would fix it. And I compiled a giant list of items, what their costs were, and how you could fix them to reduce those. And essentially went to the manufacturing leads and said, hey, this is the way that you can fix them and stuff like that. And I was basically promptly told, hey, these are great and everything, but just the 1912 brand of jeans that they have all sorts of clothes, but just the 1912 jeans makes more than their entire hunting department. So although it's cool what I did and they loved the effort and everything, it's pennies for what is actually making money there. But so, I was a little discouraged at that point, but, I had 4-ish years of outdoor experience as well as 10 years of engineering experience. And I was on Facebook one night, and the Woodman Arms page existed, but Mark wasn't super active with it. And he posted on it, not an official job posting, not any big post. Hey, we're hiring. Hey, we're looking. He said like 10 words. It said, hey, does anyone know how to use SolidWorks? That's all it said. Hey, does anyone know how to use SolidWorks? And SolidWorks, for those who don't know, as an engineer, that's like the main program that you use to actually design in 3D on your computer. And I was like, no shit. Well, I know how to use it. I've been using it for 10 years. I've been designing for 10 years. Let's ask. And so I reached out to Mark. I was like, hey, I know how to do it. And he was like, well, kind of what's your end game with this? And I didn't basically start by saying, I want you to hire me right now, but I did. I was like, why don't we do this? Why don't I contract for you? And rather than you paying me, I will contract for the enough hours to equate to a rifle. So at the very end, if you're not happy with my work, I get a rifle, you get some work, and we part as friends. So that you don't have to spend money, you just give me a rifle. Well, long story short, we started making some changes, doing some upgrades, and at the very end, I got a rifle, and I said, hey, I'm not happy where I'm at work right now. It's not a bad job, but it's not where I want to be. Hire me full time, and let's keep going. Let's keep building this thing. And we hit it off pretty easily when we first started, and kind of one of those the rest is history things. I hired on full time, and then we got it going on, upgrading the G3 and some other fun stuff that's going to be releasing soon. So it's amazing the lag also. I've been on for 2 years, and other than the Woodman Arms Patriot G3, which did just come out, a lot of the other projects are so long-term, they're just going to start rolling out, and you're just going to start seeing them in the next few months. So pretty exciting.
So how old were you when you started there, when that whole conversation happened?
28, 29, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I'm 31 now. So I'll give you that timeline.
So are you? What would you say? A lot of people might not be interested in I am because I deal in this world too. Not the gun manufacturing world, but the manufacturing world. What would you say your break? Like, how many hours a week? Well, what percentage of time, we'll say, do you spend on the marketing and sales versus the engineering side?
It's week to week, depending on what's going on.
Course.
So, like, if I'm running shows, I'm doing stuff like that's a little different. But on an average week, I would say probably 15 to 20% of my time is sales and marketing. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot of, it's maintaining vendors and stuff like that. I'm not actively every day going out to find new distributors. But, like, talking to, the vendors that we do have, and, like, the social media posts, I do those as well. So, getting those scheduled.
Yeah.
But most of my time, especially where, Mark is savant smart. Again, I can't remember if you said you've ever spoken with him. But he is extremely, extremely smart. And so him and I will talk, and I have a list that I don't know if you guys can see, and for those who are listening, I have a hanging beaver pelt with a coyote. That's actually my to-do list that I covered, because I have so much stuff that we're actively doing, and that'd be one hell of a release. Just be like, here's everything we're doing. So there's so much to do with engineering, and when he hired me full time, and him and I really clicked, it just worked out well. He had an engineer before, and he was a good guy, but kind of where the mesh of worlds happened was, someone would design something for him, and it would work in 3D world, but anyone like myself or you guys would look at it and say, hey, if you get mud in there, that's not going to work. Hey, that's too flimsy for what we're doing. If that gets cold, where I guide and I hunt and I did the engineering, I understood. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's where it really meshed well.
Yep. That's cool. So do you want to give an overview of, like, I would say the Patriot rifle, muzzleloading rifle, is probably like the flagship fire. Well, is muzzleloader considered a firearm? Like
it depends where you are.
But
so most
to the
places
FDA or the ATF, it isn't, right?
Correct.
But you can call it. I mean,
right. It is a rifle. It's a muzzleloading rifle.
Right.
You know what I mean? But ATF does not consider it a muzzleloader.
Right.
But depending on where you live, I either can ship it right to your door, or an FFL. Most places I can ship right to your door.
Right. Okay. So do you want to give an overview of, like, the Patriot for the people that don't know? I mean, actually, well, you got one right behind you, and I have one behind this wall here. But like, what are the features of it that make it stand out and are different than others?
Sure. So let me kind of, to answer that, let me start how the company started, because that does matter for all the features. So in 2009, so Mark Woodman and his father are part owners in a precision machine shop. Both, avid hunters. Mark loves muzzleloaders. He's always loved them. And he has 5 or 6 different muzzleloaders, and I'm not big on downing any other brand, but long story short, he had 5 or 6 muzzleloaders, all very popular ones, and there was one thing or another that he didn't like about them. One was too heavy, not accurate enough. Hey, this one's stainless, but it corrodes. Basically a handful of things. And long story short, he was hunting in 2009, and he said, you know what? I think I can make something better. Kind of that American dream story. And he did it. So between 2009 and 2011, he designed the original Patriot. And because, he has the ability of the precision machine shop, he made the first one in 2011. In 2012, Woodman Arms was born. Or born may not be the right word, established.
Yeah.
And so why that matters for the features is all the features are they're very thoughtful, and they all have a reason, because the people making it, Mark, who's an avid hunter, Timmy Bulldog is a guide, I'm a guide. Like, people who are making it, we're making what we want to carry, because we know that's what is needed, which obviously it's the same stuff that everybody else would want. So to talk a little bit about the features of the gun, it's a lightweight gun. It's only 5.5 pounds. So you're getting, a 40, 45, or 50 caliber muzzleloader, only 5.5 pounds. It's all stainless steel, nitride coated. And what matters about the stainless steel is it's 400 series stainless, which is actually a food grade stainless. So that's why, you may have heard before, you don't need to clean these muzzleloaders. From a manufacturer, obviously you should clean your muzzleloader. As a person, as John, I've never cleaned my muzzleloader. We went up to a show, Hunt Stock in New York last year, and we shot 400 times. That's exaggeration, like 350 times. over the course of a weekend. We never cleaned it one time because using Blackhorn, or these are smokeless powder rated, which is a really big deal. That's a feature. They can withstand those pressures. It's essentially a single shot rifle at that point. You can't see this for the listeners, but there's a recessed swell in the fore end, and that's where the balance point is. So, a lot of guns, they tend to be forward heavy or back heavy depending on how they're made. This one balances right where your hand goes. In all of the sights and sight packages, whether it's peep sights, scope mounts, any of those things, they're all designed thin profile. So although you're holding it at that balance point for when you're walking around, it carries right whether you're using a scope or using a peep. Another thing that we do is anything that you're looking at has some level of coating on it or heat treatment. So everything is very high grade. And then we have a patented brake trigger system. And why that's a big deal is the brake trigger does two things. It's at the very front of the trigger itself. And that breaks it open so you can put your 209 primer in it. But if you keep pulling it, it actually sets an internal hammer. And why that's a big deal is I'm sure everyone has heard, keep your powder dry, some adage like that. Because there's no exposed hammer, there's no place for water to easily get into the gun to get the powder wet. So Timmy Bulldog, we're actually going to video it this summer. He took his, loaded it completely. He didn't put any special wax. He didn't do anything over the end of the barrel like duct tape or electrical tape or anything. And he submerged his Patriot for 5 minutes in a kiddie pool. He took it out, boom, no problem, because of that tight sabbat and that internal hammer system.
Yep.
I actually tell the story all the time. I was tracking a deer last year, and I was in like that swale grass kind of crappy stuff, and I could see where the river was cutting through, but the swale grass was hiding some of the river that I didn't see, and I fell in the river up to my hips, submerged the entire gun. I had to blow mud out of the peep. I get to the other side of the river because, I'm already in the river. I might as well cross it. Get to the other side. I keep following the deer. About 20-ish minutes later, my wool pants are clicking and they're rubbing my legs because they're frozen in friggin' cylinders. But ice had gone all over my Patriot, like a sheen of ice. And I caught up with the deer and shot it. When I shot it, it was like a scene out of Frozen. Boom! And all the ice just sort of blasted off the sides and sprinkled down, got the deer. But yeah, submerged and frozen in mud and ice, and no problem.
Yeah.
No issue with accuracy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so, is it true that they're made? And I don't know I don't know if Mark told me this or who, but are they made to carry in points like the 7600? Is that true
Correct.
as well?
So
yeah, okay.
The length of pull, the trigger distance from the safety, all of that is the same as the 7600.
Okay, yep.
For those looking, I actually have a 7600 above it
Yep.
I'm redoing. But I actually put that there to kind of show. If you look at the angle's a little weird on
Yep.
my laptop, but it's the same
Yep.
length of pull. It's that same comb. It's we actually I'm pretty excited about this. We just did a revamp of the buttstock of our rifles.
Yep.
And it may not seem like the biggest deal to some people. It's like, it's just a different style of buttstock. It's a pretty big deal when it comes to how it holds, how it carries. I personally think it looks way
Is
better.
that the new one that you have behind you?
Yes.
Okay, it's going to say
That's
it
the
looks
new
like the new one to me. Yep. I got you.
I had the old one, but I must have put it downstairs.
Yeah, the old one almost
yeah,
has
so-
like a radius or some on it more than a
curve.
straight line, I think, from what I can see.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And this also opens us up, stay tuned, a little teaser here, but that style and that shape opens us up to another world of stocks when it comes to different options outside of wood and laminate that is going to be coming fairly soon.
Yep.
And that's going to be a pretty big deal. We have
Yep.
some pretty good stuff in the works with that, so I'm excited for when that comes out.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate wood stocks. I like them. They're super pretty. But I prefer a synthetic stock just for hunting, just because I beat the crap out of stuff, and I feel like that wood is just too pretty sometimes to be in the woods.
No,
Although,
I agree. Actually, this rifle, I just got back from a spring bear hunt here in Maine. Maine doesn't have a spring bear hunt, but if you are a Native American or tribe in Maine, you can host a bear hunt. So I went on a Native American hunt, and it was rainy, shitty the entire time, and basically I just sat in the rain. I shot a great boar,
oh, good.
but I freaking hammer. I was pretty pumped about that bear.
Awesome.
Nick is actually editing it now. The hunt's going to come out on the Woodman Arms channel on YouTube. But yeah, I got it all on video and the whole thing. But yeah, I wish I had synthetic because, yeah, it's pretty wood. And actually, that's my show gun. That's my personal gun and my show gun. So when I'm going to different vendors and stuff, I need to have a pristine rifle because I don't want to go there. It's like, hey, this is what you could buy. By the way, I beat it to hell.
Yeah, right.
So you know what I mean? So I actually have 2 stocks, one I hunt with and one that's for show. So
I gotcha. I'm curious to get into and if I say anything that's not accurate or has changed, let me know. I'll say that.
Sure.
Okay. But as far as I know, the last I've heard, the like recommended Blackhorn load or at least projectile is one of those, I think a Fury Star tip, like a 225 or 250 with a Sabbat. Is it which I don't know if they sell, is it their Sabbat or is it someone else's?
It's a Harvester Sabbat.
Harvester, that's right. Yeah. That's what I figured. Can you talk a little bit about that, like kind of not necessarily load development, but like how you guys arrived at that and why you think that combination? And I remember the last time Remington SST 209 primers was kind of the recommended one. I don't know if that's changed either, but can you talk about that like load and like how you guys got there and maybe why it works better than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of to start with, everyone loves the idea, and it's good in theory, the pellets. You know, hey, you drop a pellet, that's 50, you drop another pellet, and I get it. However, they are very inconsistent. What they're made of is actually absorbent. So, you know, if anyone's ever put their gun in their truck at the end of the day, it will condensate, and those pellets will absorb that water. And they are very brittle. So what's very common actually is when you're putting those pellets in your rifle, you know, you go to seat your bullet and they will crack in your depth that your bullet is going, your seating depth will actually change, and that changes how your projectile performs. So the way that you combat that is using the loose powder, but understandably some guys are a little turned away from that because, you know, they don't want to make a grenade, they don't want to put too much powder. How much do I even put? I have to weigh it versus volume. So how we arrived at that is we realized that, hey, this is a point of pressure for people. Let's develop a load that we can tell people, hey, it is, I think it was 57 of Blackhorn. Look, we have all the load data on our website, so if I am to say the wrong data, because I've done about 45 different powders, please look on our website before doing your own. But I want to say it was 57 grains of Blackhorn 209 and a 250 grain bullet in a 24-inch barrel was our, like, kind of that money spot. And that just came through testing and shooting and saying, hey, 57 grains, 58 grains, 59, and we would go up in increments. And so every rifle is a little different. Technically, you know, like this rifle here, and if you bought one, 57 is a good start, but you may go up or go down in grains a little bit and get even better performance. But I would say for the average hunter taking a shot under 100 yards, just start with the load data and you're gonna be just fine.
So you're talking 57 grains of Blackhorn by weight out. That seems like a very light load to me, no?
Oh, you know what I'm thinking of?
You're thinking of Smokeless? Because that sounds more like a Smokeless load to me.
I'm thinking of N120. Pardon me.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
77 grains.
Okay.
77 grains.
Yeah, I think that's what I shoot, 78. So
that makes way more sense.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. That was
it was just it was a big discrepancy, and I don't want people listening to like get, you know, so that's all. But yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so, and you guys found that works well. The primer, is that something that you guys, I know that Remington SST was like the recommended one. Is it still? And then I know sometimes those aren't, maybe they are again, but I know for a lot of times that like they weren't really available.
Yeah, so SSTs are still, and they are becoming more available.
Okay.
Also, Chedites are phenomenal.
Yep.
Those are also really good. Actually, Chedites more because there's a film, if you will, over the actual. So you have the actual like point where the hammer hits.
Yep.
Where that flash hole is on, say, an SST, it's
on
just
the front
open.
of it. Yep.
It's on like the front, but there's a film over the Chedites, so it's just even more potential moisture resistance. But yeah, those are still kind of the recommended ones.
And so for people that are listening, would you say, I know this is definitely the case for Smokeless, but for Blackhorn, do you want like, and I know this is like a really loose term, but like a hotter 209 primer than, because some are considered. I mean, considered hotter, I guess, if you know it. Like those muzzleloader, like the ones they say are muzzleloader primers. Oh, you do not want those, correct?
So this is where you get into the minutia of load data, and I could nerd out about this because I'm an engineer for the entire time we talk. But for what most people want to hear, every powder burns a little different.
Right.
So what I would recommend, if anyone, which we even sell these powders, if you were to just be getting into it, still just use the SSTs or Chedites, Vitavori, N110, N120, very common powders, H4198, a little harder to find, but those ones burn just fine with those regular primers.
Yeah.
So different powders with different burn rates and different properties, from a chemical level, those might change depending, but I would just, for the average hunter, just stick with those, or just give us a call if, either because a bunch of guys reload and say, hey, I have a bunch of this.
On the 20 or the Blackhorn 209 side though, are you seeing that? Is that pretty forgiving with the primer? I think, in my experience, it seems like the Smokeless is a little more picky on particularly 209 primers. Do you feel like the Blackhorn is the same, or is that less picky on the primer?
Blackhorn is definitely less picky.
It is,
Blackhorn is definitely less picky. In fact, if I was to say our recommended thing to do with the Smokeless, like hey, you are going to have the best ignition. We make a large rifle primer adapter that goes into modules, and the reason is because it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Hey, we have rifle powder using a rifle primer is going to be your best chance. That being said, that bear I shot, you're going to do just fine with the 209s with the with the Smokeless powder.
Yep.
But your options are a little more limited. Whereas if you're using the module system, you press it into a module into that breech plug, and you're using the large rifle primers. That is your best bet.
That makes sense. Are you using large rifle magnums for that, or just a standard large rifle typically?
Standard.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
And you're having no ignition problems with that, huh?
No,
those
that's
two
technically
powders?
That's technically the best way. Which again, it just sort of makes sense. Like your rifle primers with the powder, they're made for each other, literally. So,
did Henry ever figure out what was going on with his when he was squibbing bullets with his Smokeless? Do you remember that when we did the range day when Cody was here?
Cody was here.
We went to the place
Henry's?
He was shooting.
I don't think he was. What do you mean by squibbing bullets? I guess let's start with that. What do you mean by squibbing bullets?
Like
they don't come all the way down the barrel. They stop halfway through the barrel.
Not squibbing, right? But he was they were falling out of the end and going 30 yards. He had a couple of those.
I don't remember that, so I don't.
You don't?
No, I don't remember that at all.
You were yelling at that guy, and you guys were going back and forth. The member.
Oh, the old guy? I always feel like I was pretty good with that guy. That's maybe why I don't remember, because I preoccupied. We were at the gun range, and there was which I can appreciate his approach to an extent, because it's a gun range, right? You want to be safe. That's so good for him. But he was a little bit over the top with some stuff, and was
he would just
on
sit
us
there
for
and
stuff,
watch.
and I'm like, you just did. I'm like, what? I didn't. I was like, what are you talking about? I haven't done any. And so I was like, it was really in my head because I had a couple guests there, and I'm a member, and it was I was like, this guy is just ruining this experience, and everybody that we're with has been previous law enforcement. Henry sold Remingtons for he literally he worked for Remington and sales. These people have been around guns for their whole life and shot thousands and thousands of rounds, and it was hey, we kind of know how to handle. I understand. It's always good to have be aware of that stuff, and everybody gets careless sometimes and sloppy, so you want to say something, but this guy was over the top. I don't know if you think
there's
so too.
always that one range officer. There always is that one range officer who is literally militant.
It was just wild. It was just tough because I was I felt responsible for these guys, and I don't think they're doing anything wrong, but I'm how do I handle the situation with this guy that's being I think just over the top, and I was anyway, so I don't remember that. So I have no idea. I don't have a good answer for you.
I think he only shot it a couple times and then was I'll just deal with this later.
Well, that's the thing with,
He was
if
having
you think
some
about it
issues.
though, like, you know, when you have a rifle, right, you have a piece of brass, you have a primer, you have powder, and you have a bullet, and it's all put together. And like, there's not a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong once that cartridge is loaded, right? Like, you can kind of like, not literally, but do kind of anything to it, and it's still going to go off for the most part. I mean, there's some things you can obviously do to compromise it, but when you have all those things separate and they're stored in separate places, they come from different places, they're handled different ways, and you're introducing so many more variables to the equation, and things that could go wrong. So I think a lot of people, when they talk about muzzleloaders, like, they have a negative experience, and they just like throw out the whole system because of it. And it's like, hey, there's probably something here that we're missing. One component, like your powder was wet, or maybe you didn't have a good fit in your bore with your bullet or your Sabbat or whatever. Like, there's a number of things that go wrong. So who knows what that could be.
And that's the reason that we made that load data
Yep.
chart, is because we don't want people to have that experience. So I'd be super interested to know what his combination was, what bullet, because I basically promise you, if he did anything off our list, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Because we've tested it and tested it and tested it. Where if it's like, well, I only found this sort of primer, or, well, I didn't find this powder, so I used this, or I used power belts, which suck, instead of the Furies. Like, actually, that wouldn't matter. They'd come out anyway. But still, like, I'd be interested to know what his recipe was for that. But that's why we wanted to make that extensive list. We have 45s and 50s lists with powders and all the suggested loads and bullets for that reason.
So what are what's the 40 loads look like? Because obviously you don't really shoot smokeless in a 50, but what is
you can shoot smokeless in a 50.
Can you?
In ours, you can now. That's the G3 part of that. I guess a feature I didn't touch on is we sized our 50s to be able to use smokeless.
So what does that mean? Sized? What did you size?
So what it all comes down to is the amount of pressure that's in.
Yep.
In the barrel. So what we did is, between the version 2 and the version 3, when I redesigned it, basically what I did is I added more wall thickness to the actual expansion point. And that gives it the rigidity it needs to be able to do what it needs to do.
So what was the difference in wall thickness then? Like, what did you go? I'm just curious. Like, what was that?
I can't remember.
Is it like,
I can't remember what it was.
Was it significant, or is it like, maybe I'm very curious.
Sure.
Not specifically, but was it like, did you go up like 10%, or was it like 25%, or like,
it was a number. It was definitely a number. And that was we started this G2 to G3 project 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I can't remember exactly how much, but it was enough that if you actually, do you have a G2 or version 2?
I must. I don't know which one it is.
Where you would see it the most is where the actual barrel meets the receiver.
Yep.
This is going to be random numbers, but there's essentially a 2-inch section of thick barrel before the taper in the G2.
Yep.
For the G3, there's almost 3.5 inches of thickness.
That makes sense.
So you were added material, and the amount of length carrying that thick material was more. And then we ran non-destructive testing and all this other stuff, and it was perfectly safe.
So what pressures then is the 50 cal at then? It's got to be like 60,000 psi or something like that. If you're
I can't remember the exact
roughly,
numbers, because we ran those non-destructive testing stuff a while ago, but you're still getting velocities of, well over 2,000, you know what I mean? And for those listening, this is actually something that many may not know. If you are looking to buy a muzzleloader, most guys think 50 because that's fairly common. 45 is ballistically just far, far better. It just has far more energy. It carries. It's flatter. So if you were to buy one right now, so you're going to Woodman Arms or any, but obviously we carry 45. It's just a better round. So
would you say furthermore 40s? Well, I know ballistically they're probably better, but would you say 40s over the 45 too? I think the problem with 40s is they're not legal everywhere.
It's legality.
Yeah.
I would do a 40 all day,
right,
but it's not legal everywhere.
Yeah.
So obviously 45s, but a 40 is even better and even faster, and it's just better. It's funny. I've spoken to some people because I'm fairly active. I volunteer for a nonprofit for kids with hunting, so I talk to legislature a lot about, and so I'll get talking to people about this kind of stuff, and I'll talk about like the math about that stuff, and at the end of the day, they just don't care. It's like, look, this is the energy at impact difference between say this and this, and it's very lethal. Like, you know what I mean? And they just don't care. You know what I mean? Like.
Well, and the other thing, and I don't know, if you're deer hunting in the Northeast, ballistics, it's borderline whether it's something you should, not terminal ballistics, you should be concerned about that, but actual like flight characteristics of a bullet. I would say it's debatable whether that's even a really a factor that you should consider. But if you think about shooting a 250 grain bullet out of a 50 cal versus a 250 grain bullet out of a 45 versus a 250 out of a 40, you're going to get a way higher BC bullet as you go down in caliber, which is a favorable thing for the most part. Now, obviously, that really comes into play when you're shooting longer ranges. But with a muzzleloader, when you start to creep over 150 yards into that 200 to 300, that actually does make a really big impact, I think. And not a lot of guys are shooting that far, but if you do, and that is like doable in some instances for sure, especially if you're going somewhere to hunt, like that could be a big deal. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's this year actually I shot one at 220 yards.
Oh, did you?
And I live in Maine. That never happens. I just happen to go. I have a Christmas tree farm. I have permission to hunt, and when I get there, they're always in the woods, not in the trees. And I get there, I get out of my truck, I turn to my right, all the way down the row, there was just this doe standing there broadside looking at me. And I was like, no way. So I took a deep breath. I knew what my drop was roughly. I didn't do any math. I was like, okay, I know I'm going to be about a 5 to 6 inch drop. So and I know, so I basically just put it on her spine, knowing it wasn't going to hit her in the spine. You know what I mean? So I just held over, pow, thwap. It was the first time I've ever shot far enough that I shot and then heard the impact. You know what I mean? Like, anywhere in New England, I mean, most of my shots are, 30 max. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, pow, thwap, dropped, inner tracks, done. And that was a Sabbated 250 grain bullet. That was Blackhorn 209. Okay. Like it was the exact same load I run all that. I didn't size a load up. It's just basically held over. I knew what my drop was and didn't have to track or anything. Just dropped. You know what I mean? Because our barrels we rate them to sub MOA at 100 yards. So, I mean, at 200, you're still a clover leaf. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So on the smokeless side, are you guys still shooting that same star tip with the Harvester Sabbat? Is that so? Nothing changes there. Okay.
Same bullet. That's same bullet. That Fury bullet really is an absolute workhorse. That thing. I mean, I in the same one. I used that 250 grain to shoot that deer. I used it to kill that bear. I mean, I might use a little heavier one if I shot a moose, but I would not hesitate to shoot a moose. A little heavier. I think I would put a little bit more powder in it, but either way, I'm sure it would do just fine.
Do you know? Is it? It's an interesting looking bullet because it almost looks like the nose is so it has to be. Is it copper jacketed lead? It must be.
Yes. Okay.
And I know the shank is like knurled, and then it's got almost looks like the nose is like crimped, but it makes that star looking tip, right?
Right.
Have you guys had any? That's what I was curious about because I know with the Blackhorn, unless you don't really have a ton of like high velocity impacts, but with smokeless, have you guys seen like those bullets like at 2,500 feet per second plus 2,800 stay like really do well and stay together on like bone impacts? That's so interesting. Or the one thing I was
absolutely.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, I mean the whole reason for that crimping at the end has to do with expansion. So it hits and it does exactly what it needs to do. I mean, so for instance, the bear was the first thing I shot. This was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That I used one of those. I hit it. It went. I mean, I had a 45. I guess it'd be a 40 caliber hole right in the neck because it's 40 caliber bullet in the 45 Sabbat. Yep. So right in the neck. And then when we cut it open to take a look at stuff like that, I mean, it went right through, expanded. The hole on the other side is something I wouldn't post on Facebook. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So it works. It freaking just does the job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be too worried about that.
I've always been So I like in my rifles, I like to shoot a copper solid. Like I just always liked monolithic bullets and the idea of how them staying together and, relatively controlled expansion at like all velocities. And so, but the problem most of the time, and I don't know, you guys may disagree or have a different, maybe you found something different, but the problem it seems like when you go to a copper solid or any monolithic bullet in a muzzleloader is the bullet doesn't obturate the same that a lead core bullet does because lead's way softer than copper or brass. So you don't really get that engagement with the rifling, so the bullet doesn't stabilize as well, and sometimes it's just not as accurate. And so I've always I've tried and I've struggled to get them to shoot as accurate as like a lead core bullet. So I that's what I shoot now, lead core, but I've been, like I said, a little bit just because of that. It's, lead is soft and it can break apart. I've always been like curious to see how the star tips and some of these other ones do at those high velocity impacts where, a monolithic bullet would probably excel. But that's cool to hear that they're staying together and, doing the job.
No, they're doing great. And actually, if you're really interested in that, not to get deep into the minutia, but we do the Woodman Arms Patriot, but we also do long-range muzzleloader builds. So we're talking 1,000-yard muzzleloaders, on like Kelbley's actions, Defiance actions. And when you're doing that, I mean, for those who don't know, obviously you're using your bullet into a Sabbat into your barrel. And for most hunting applications, that's precise enough. And I mean, sub MOA at 100 yards, even with that. But if you're looking to go out and really reach something, you actually are doing something different. Like you're saying monolithic bullet and you're swaging the bullets. Are you familiar with that term?
Oh, yeah.
So swaging bullets, for those who don't know, you're essentially sizing the bullet to the bore of your individual rifle.
Yep.
So you're not using a Sabbat anymore. For easy math, we'll say you have a 45 caliber, your bullet is .451, so oversized, and you'll press your bullet through a sizing die, which will shim a perfectly concentric amount of copper off the side of the bullet down to the thousandth until it fits a perfect seal into your rifle. And at that point, I mean, guys are taking those and shooting 1,000 yards with them all day. You know what I mean?
Those guys are shooting sometimes better than groups than like precision rifles. Like
I was actually talking
they're almost
to a guy
easier to get to shoot because there's there's less variables. Honestly, at that point they've isolated it to less variables because you don't have brass to contend with. So you have powder, bullet, and a projectile, whereas these guys have brass. So you have seating depth is probably the big one, and then every piece of brass is slightly different, where your chamber is the same every time. So it seems like those guys are shooting more accurate.
No, absolutely. I was down at the Great American Outdoor Show in Pennsylvania, and a guy came up to me. He goes, "I have one of your bullets. One of your rifles. I shoot it in competitions, and everyone's switching over to muzzleloader." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." He's like, "Yeah, I think he had a 7mm rum or something like that beforehand." But he's like, "Yeah, you just said, you usually have bolt face to brass, brass to bullet, bullet to land, land to rifling, out the thing. With muzzleloader, you have bullet to bore, done. Right. That's it. I mean, you're really taking out those variables.
Right.
So, it's kind of interesting.
That's pretty cool. Why don't you talk a little bit about like Smokeless versus Blackhorn and some of the considerations when, like, say someone buys the G3 is the new one that's probably okay. So someone buys the G3 and they're trying to decide, hey, should I go with a Blackhorn load or a Smokeless load? Like, what are the pros and cons in your opinion of each?
Sure. So first off, the first thing to check is smokeless powder legal in your state?
Right.
Most states are yes, but what's very interesting about New England, like Maine, go for it. New Hampshire, all day. Vermont, for some reason, not about it. Go figure. But either way, just check to see if it's legal where you're at. Most places, it's yes. Now, ultimately, it's sort of a lopsided T-chart of pro and con, because I'm going to talk about the smokeless. Ultimately, I don't really see a con, and you can tell me if you see one. Yeah. So at the end of the day, Blackhorn 209, for those who don't know, or maybe you're just getting into it, when I first bought my Blackhorn, I think it was $80 for a 10-ounce container. Now it's $110 for an 8-ounce container. Yeah. So it's fairly expensive, whereas, there's so many different powders that are available on the market that you can order on Midway USA and ship right to your house, and it's far cheaper. And the pressures and the energy you're getting from smokeless powder are far higher than Blackhorn 209. So you actually need less powder to get the same performance as you would with Blackhorn. So it's less money and you need less of it. So that's even better. Another great thing about it, which Blackhorn does have some of these properties too, but not the same, is, whereas say Pirate X and stuff tends to, draw moisture to it, like those Pirate X pellet, both Blackhorn and even more Smokeless powder is hydrophobic. If you were to put a little powder pile and then put like an eyedropper of water next to it, it would not like draw to it like a sponge. It would just sort of sit there. Obviously, if you saturate it, you saturate it. But that's another really good aspect of it. And I was actually speaking to the product manager, or what would you call it? Yeah, project manager of Blackhorn 209. And I was talking about, that process. Apparently, it's a very dirty process. It just takes a lot of effort to make it, which is why it's so expensive and why it, And I asked them, hey, there's a huge need for this. Are you looking to like expand and do more with it? And at the end of the day, that answer, from what I understood, maybe he didn't have to tell me anything, but it was no. Whereas smokeless powder, it's not just Blackhorn or nothing. You have, I think we have 30 different smokeless powders. So if you can't find one, well, what about this one? What about this one? I mean, it's way more options as well. So I don't really have a con for smokeless other than if you live in Vermont. Sorry.
Yeah, I think just the only, not necessarily a con, it's just a caution with smokeless is if you double load your muzzleloader with a smokeless load versus a Blackhorn load, the results could be a lot more dangerous. So I just think that aspect of it, and not that you shouldn't be careful with any load, but like it's a difference between maybe like a really, really heavy recoil and you like, have a bloody nose versus like the barrel could explode. So like that's, I think probably, in my opinion, the biggest thing that people need to be, when I've shot smokeless for a while on a few different guns, and the biggest thing that I like took home was like even just having like a witness mark on your ramrod, which is a good idea with any muzzleloader you're using, but it's really a good idea with the smokeless loads because, like I said, it's you're playing with a little bit more energy there, and there's more potential there. So that would be the only con that I would see.
No, that's a really good point. So I guess there's no real cons if you're going on our website, you're following the recipes that we have laid out for the bullets and everything. No worries. However, like you said, taking those precautions, and again, also like you said, is good regardless of what powder, Blackhorn, using actual black powder, whatever. Witness mark on your ramrod, knowing, kind of having a process in your head, like, okay, I'm going to put my funnel, then my powder, like having that recipe while you're actually loading, do it enough that you're comfortable with it, and just realizing that, hey, this, like you just said, double loading could be a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
That being said, another video we're going to do, because Mark said we could, is myself and Nick are going to try to blow one up with smokeless and see
I want to see
what
that.
point
are you going to Are you going to put the loads too that you're like put what you're actually
we're going to say like we're going to start out with recommended load now.
Yeah.
Plus, then we're going to do double load because, I have a story I'll tell you off camera of a guy who called in and let's just say he didn't listen and the gun survived. But
okay, that's good sign.
A lot of powder in those. Yeah. But I don't even want to mention it on camera just in case someone's like, "Oh, you can do that. I'm going to put this much in then." So
no, you don't want to you don't want to fool around with this stuff. No. You do not want to. You're making
if you really do. I mean, any muzzleloader, not ours. If you put too much powder, you're making a grenade. You know what I mean? Like. And you got to be careful.
And there's really no reason to like even push it with smokeless because in my opinion, the increase in performance you're getting over Black Power, Pirate X, or Blackhorn 209 is so significant that you don't need to push you're getting velocities that are far higher, and usually accuracy that's better. That like there's really no reason to push the envelope. You don't like what's I mean. Some of the bolt action guns where they're shooting 70 something grains of 120 or 4198 or whatever they have with like a 300 grain bullet. I mean, their energy is more significant than like almost any centerfire rifle that you can.
100%.
It's the performance is like they're elephant guns. Like, so what are you chasing unless you like?
Yeah,
I
what are
don't
you
know.
doing?
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. What are you chasing? Unless you just like
No.
playing with fire. Like, I don't really. There's really no reason to push it and to try to get more performance out of it once you get into that realm. Like, you're getting so much performance, and then like I've even seen sometimes like with those, the terminal performance on game, particularly like white tail size stuff, is pretty dramatic with smokeless powder. Like it's
Yeah.
Do you get
It's
to a
rough.
point where the damage is so catastrophic with an animal the size of a deer that you like cross a line where it's
I think
like,
sometimes when you're talking those 3,000 foot
Yeah,
per second
you're-
muzzleloaders with 300 grain bullet,
you're losing
Dude, yeah,
such a
it's-
great percentage of the meat.
Yeah, you're
If you-
taking it's too. I mean, I say this when I'm moose guiding too, so this isn't muzzleloader specific, but like, you know, guys always, which I think is just an excuse to buy a gun, but like I'll get a call if I booked a client to go moose hunting. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go get a, you know, whatever 500 Smith & Wesson, some giant, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm just like, what do you use for a deer gun? It's like, oh, I use a 270. It's like, just bring that. That's
Yeah.
perfectly sufficient for moose. So
Yeah.
like, if that's fine for moose, just stop. Like, you don't
Yeah.
need anything more than that. I mean, 22-250 for a deer is, if you put, it's bullet placement at the end of the day. You know what I mean? That is far more important. I mean, it's crazy some of the stuff that, you know, guys will, I actually cringe. You know, oh, what do you hunt deer with? Oh, my grandfather's old 308. Cool. They come up, hey, I bought this 2 weeks ago. I sighted it on a bench. I've used it for like 2 times.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh God, we're gonna have a gut shot. So yeah, I'm gonna be tracking a moose. But no, it's kind of to get back to the muzzleloader stuff. Like, you know, I know mine. I used the 57 grains of 4198, and I chronographed mine, and I was getting over 2,400 feet per second.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
out of a muzzleloader. Like,
It's wild.
you're getting better than some center fires.
I think the one setup I have is, I don't
So
know
you were
what
like-
I shoot. I shoot
You were like
60.
2,600 or something like that.
Yeah, 20. I'm shooting 63 or 64 grains of H4198 with a
Yep.
275 grain bullet, and that's 2650. And that
Yep.
I've hit some. I've seen. It's been some moon channels, some holes, and it's like, all right, that's like pretty. I don't think I need that.
That's a little much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, oh man. So, but that was also kind of my concern with some of these bullets. I'm like, man, if I had a brat or a copper bullet, it would stick together and it would still be dramatic, but I don't think it would be as dramatic. I guess the expansion at those velocities with, you know, some of these, you know, lead core bullets is like I said, it's dramatic and just like holy
No,
crap.
it's crazy, and even actually those Fury bullets. I had another guy at the Great American Outdoor Show come up to me, and he showed me a picture. He's like, I shot a deer. I'm like, sweet man. He's showing me, tell me the story. And he kind of has a smirk on his face, talk about like the energy in these things.
Yeah.
And he shows me a picture, and I'm looking at the entrance wound and the exit wound, and it just looked wrong. And I wasn't 100% sure, but it just looked wrong. I was like, what's happening? I was like, what was your load? It's always my first question, because basically, what bullet are you using?
Yeah.
You know, like for like a cased bullet, I want to know what was your recipe that did this. And he's like, right off your website, and he spelled out exactly what he used. I'm like, okay, what distance were you? And he was like, oh, I was 35, 40 yards. And I'm looking at this wound channel. I'm like, this does not make sense. And then he just has this smirk, and then he swiped, and he's like, yeah, I saw this deer. I poked out behind a tree, pow! I dropped the deer and made a couple steps and dropped. He then shows me the next picture. There was a paint can size, like a small paint can size maple with a hole through it. And then it hit the deer after it and tumbled. Right. I'm just like, you went through a hardwood and still killed the deer?
Yeah.
It's like, that's the kind of energy we're talking about here. So, you're pushing 2,600 feet per second and not shooting through a tree, you're going to turn that thing inside out. Yeah.
It's a lot of energy. It's like, it's a big difference. It's a big difference. I'll say that. You know, part of the reason I want to go to Smokeless is, and it sounds like I'll say, like, I haven't shot, well, I don't know if I've shot an animal with the start. Maybe I shot like a coyote or something with it, but I don't know if I've shot an animal with it. But that's why I asked about it, because I haven't. But I've my Patriot is set up for Blackhorn in that I think it's a 225 Fury, and that's what I shoot out of. I just haven't happened. Like I said, I think I shot a coyote with it, but I haven't actually shot a deer with it. Just how.
Do you know what barrel length you have? by chance?
I don't know. It was kind of one of the. So I got it in 2021 or 22. I don't know if there was. I want to say it's 24 inches. It's not a super. I have it right there. I should go grab it. It probably says it right on the barrel. Well, maybe not, but yeah.
So why I ask is we find that a 24-inch barrel, at least 24-inch barrel tends to like a 250 grain bullet, and the 22-inch carbines tend to like 225s.
Okay.
So that makes sense, that's why I ask, is because if you're gonna do it, I would get 250s.
I haven't shot anything with it, but I forget where I was going with this now. Okay. So yeah, when I used to shoot like a TC, I had two of them. I had a TC Omega that I shot a bunch of deer with, and I had a TC Triumph, and those are like the two guns that I hunted with for a long time. And they're fine. Like actually, they both are pretty accurate, to be honest. But they were the only thing that they're accurate with was those Shockwave bullets, and which I think is a Horn. I think Horn. Do you know? I don't know if you know this, but I almost think Hornady made that for TC, but I don't know if that's true.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I think it's almost like an SST. But anyway, those things shot really well, but the terminal performance was so bad on them. Like they didn't expand, and particularly like the lower velocities. Like I wasn't shooting like a crazy load, so I'd be hitting deer, like 1,500 feet per second, maybe 1,400, especially when you're shooting out there. And like I had just like, I remember I shot, was it $3? I shot $3 with a muzzleloader in 2016. The first was a buck in New Hampshire, and there was no issues, no failure, right? Like I shot the deer, he was 40 yards. I shot him in the heart, and he ran, I don't know, 50 yards and died. And like that wasn't a problem, but there was like no blood. And I'm like, so it's not point blank, but like for a gun, that's pretty dang close.
Right.
Shot it in the heart, and there's like no blood on the ground, and like small holes, entry and exit. Like, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. Then I shot a buck in Kentucky, actually, that 4-year-old runt-looking deer, and I shot him at about 150, 180, something like that, and it was like double lung, really good shot, same thing, like no blood, like. He was in like a food plot, I guess. It was actually behind the food plot in like a grass field. But anyway, he came out, I shot him. So I got to watch him run off for like, 50, 60, 70 yards. So I knew the direction he headed. But like, had I not known that where he ran, like it would have taken me like, and he didn't go very far. But like, there was like, I'm talking pin drops of blood and a double lung hit with a gun. And I'm like, I don't like that at all. And then like 2 days later, I shot a buck in Ohio, same setup, and I was in my trigger pull, and I was pretty far into it. Like I was expecting it to go off at some point. I'm in it, and he like takes a step as I'm shooting, and the gun goes right as and I'm like, ah. And so I thought to myself, I remember where the crosshairs were, and I thought to myself, oh, I'm like, that's liver, like that's back. Like I'm like, and I'm like, he should be fine. And so I had another buck underneath me when I shot at that one. He was probably 60, 70 yards. And he like humped up, he mule kicked and humped up. And he had actually, him and that other buck were like almost like posturing to each other. Yep. And so he didn't run off. He just like kind of stood there, and then he walks to me, like he's walking to me. And he's like kind of still posturing to this other buck. And so I'm like looking at this buck, looking at him. I'm like, I don't really know what to do right now. And it's kind of in the open. I was in a tree, but like in the timber, but it was kind of a weird situation. So I'm like, I want to shoot him again, but like I know that's going to kill him, but I don't want to spook. But I know it's going to take a while because it was like liver guts. And I'm like, so I don't want him to like run off. And he's not. He's coming at me. So I like kind of was like not moving. And this it wasn't a little buck. It was just a smaller, probably like 4 or 5 year old buck underneath me. Was looking up at me because he had seen me. So like this buck's coming, this buck. I'm like, I don't know what to do right now. So I actually didn't reload. I just stayed there, and I watched this buck walk by me at like 25 yards, and I could see the hole in him. And
no way.
Yeah, and then he kind of like I don't know. He probably at that point was feeling a little funky, so he started to go like up the ridge, and he's like walking slow. And at this point, that younger deer or smaller deer, I should say, had spooked. So I'm trying to reload really quick, and I'm like in the tree, and I like get the primer in, and I pull back, and I'm like just getting on him, and he goes behind stuff up the ridge, and I'm like, damn it. So I didn't get the shot. I'm like, all right, we'll find him in the morning. It wasn't a good shot, but like he should be dead, and like he wasn't like running out of there. We went back there. I found no blood. Not like nothing, like no blood. I never found that buck. And like it, to the point where my buddy was like, I think you missed him. I'm like, no. I'm telling you, like I had a solid rest. The trigger pull, even though he stepped, it was perfect. It was just like I executed it perfect. I have a picture in my mind of my sight picture when the shot broke, and I know where the crosshairs were. And like I said, that gun was really accurate. And then I could see and then when he walks by 20 yards, there's a hole right where I remember my crosshairs. I'm like, that's it. And I found hair where I hit, and I found where he kicked up. So like, I'm not imagining that part, but like literally never found. And then after that, I was like, I got to do something because this is not acceptable. Like, so that's when I started messing with different loads, and like, I really got turned on to Smokeless, and like the terminal performance. And it sounds like the Star Tips are doing a really good job, even with Blackhorn, which is awesome to hear. And I just haven't experienced it, but from like a Shockwave to a Smokeless load is like, it is night and day difference between like the performance.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
It's the same rifle, but it's essentially a single shot rifle.
Yeah.
Because it is. It's you know what I mean? It's funny. So the first deer I ever shot was with a Triumph. Same idea, worked fine. It did the job, but we rebarrel as well. So we rebarrel Omegas, Encores, CVA Paramounts for Smokeless. So guys will send us those, and then we'll put them for that application. But it's a lot of the guys, it's the same thing like you're saying. Hey, this is a great platform, but we want more performance.
Yeah.
And basically the way that they can get that is by retooling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
And like you're not with a Smokeless load. Like I've probably shot, I don't know, almost 10 animals now, I'd say, with a Smokeless gun.
Noticeable difference.
Oh, it's not like they don't usually they don't even go anywhere. But if they do, it's like
usually you don't have to track at all.
Yeah, most of the time it's a bang flop situation. But even if they say you don't hit any, like you hit like middle of the lung and you're not hitting bone and like affecting that central nervous system, like it's a hole that's like that big, and like I'll show you a picture, but like I have a picture of a Smokeless blood trail, and the deer did run off, but only went like 30, 40 yards, and it was like, oh my God, like it is dramatic. You're not going to have that pencil in, pencil out specks of blood, and the deer runs 200 yards on a lung hit. It's not like that at all. So
I always think it's crazy that that's an option anyway. I'm a human, and if I stub my toe, I might be out for the day.
Yeah.
Where like they'll get shot in both lungs and clip the heart, and they'll go 120 yards and die. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's insane.
I know. Oh, they're so tough.
Yeah. I've had
so
mixed.
Tough.
I'm trying to find a picture of a blood trail on. It was like a decent sized buck. It was like 170 pounds in Ohio. I shot. I have had experiences with those shockwaves that of just bad blood trails, and couple like one doe in particular went like 50 yards, didn't find it for 24 hours because it had like dove under some blowdowns.
Yeah.
But there was no blood. Went 50 yards and straight on this thick line. But then I have had some decent ones too, so I don't know what the.
Yeah, and they're
not consistent, I guess.
Anything you can have a poor result with anything.
Yeah.
And you can have a good result with anything. There's so many variables that go in it, but like it just seems like if you're looking at like statistically, like those shockwaves, from my assessment, it's just like poor performance was like more the norm than.
Accurate for sure. But
they were accurate. They shot really well. But when you're talking Smokeless, it's just like devastating. And like you said, most of the time they don't leave your sight.
It's such an upgrade. That pro-con list is just so weighted on the pro.
Oh, I totally agree with you. So I guess not even a con, but something that people should be aware of is like, they think smokeless powder, but like there are so many different smokeless powders you can buy, and they're all extremely different. Yeah. And the biggest thing that's different, well, other than like you'll have like a ball powder or whatever, but in a rifle powder, but like the burn rate is way different.
Burn
so
rate, yeah.
that
Burn
makes a
rates are
huge
huge.
impact. So like you want to stick with those powders that are recommended. That's a big one.
100%.
That's
That's why
Yeah.
we made these charts,
Yeah.
is because that was our biggest hesitation from saying, hey, you guys can use smokeless. Because
Yeah.
some guys were using smokeless anyway, but if you were getting into the smokeless game in general, most people already kind of knew how to play with it. You know,
Yeah.
like people weren't just going for it.
Yeah.
But we're like, look, the big thing with these G3s is we're not only saying you can, we recommend you can use smokeless, but hey, follow our recipe. That's just keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Follow the recipe, and it's going to work great. You know what I mean?
What is obviously I know your barrels are rated for smokeless, but for somebody who wants to do a conversion, what is the cost of that?
It depends on the gun. So
you go with like an Encore, that's probably, or a
Yeah.
Pro Hunter. Those are like probably the most popular ones.
Yeah.
That's what I have. I have a conversion. I'm trying to think of there's many. TC Scouts. That's another one that people convert a lot. I'm not a CVA Scout. I'm sorry.
So an Omega barrel is only $350.
Okay.
A 40 caliber Encore is $850.
Okay. That's
So-
pretty affordable. And people have to realize that like a lot of that cost is in the barrel anyway. So you'd be like, oh my
Yep.
God, I thought it was, like when you buy a gun, like the barrel is a big component of it. And so if you're replacing the whole barrel and the breech too, there's some cost there. Like it's not going to be like $100.
Right.
you know?
Our Encore barrels are, like I designed the barrel, the breech, the actual locking lug, the whole thing. So it's not like we're buying a Thompson Center
No.
barrel and then fitting it. We're making it custom, like Brux barrels, like nice.
Is that
stuff.
do you use Brux blanks? Is that what you're using now? Or
We
is
use
it-
Brux we use Brux and McGowan depending
Okay.
on what kind
Gotcha.
you're getting. Like if
Yep.
you're getting like the hey, I'm going to be swaging my bullets like and all that other stuff,
Yep.
then we're using Brux. But like McGowan is what we use for like the general purpose,
Okay.
which is still sub MOA.
Gotcha.
So
Yep. Yeah, that's a good question though.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I've been considering it because
yeah.
Blackhorn is Blackhorn, and
Well, the other thing is you talk about the availability of smokeless, and it is pretty good. But the powder that I develop my guns with, which I have like 4 or 5 pounds now because it became available and I grabbed it because I couldn't get it for like years, H4198.
that's what I shoot too.
Yeah. So what is, and it sounds like, and I've heard you guys have had good luck with N120. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Vitavori, N110,
Yep.
N120, 133. Those are
All of them,
those are
huh?
great
Okay.
powders. Those are all great powders.
What
N120 is like if I was to recommend one,
Yeah.
N120, but all very readily available.
are there any other powders that you guys recommend besides those ones? Or
Yeah, I mean,
there is. Okay.
we have a whole bunch.
do?
LT32, RL7, IMR. There's a bunch.
Yeah, okay.
So there's
I gotcha.
There's a lot of them.
So you guys have done a lot of shooting then
Well,
with those.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how often do you get to get paid to go shoot? So
Yeah.
you know what I mean. While we're at the range and have all the equipment and
Right.
have all the bullets, because we have one. I'm sure a lot of guys do. We have like one of the automatic RCBS scales. So like,
Yep.
basically plug that in,
Yeah.
put in a new powder, hit the load. All right, let's shoot. See what happens.
Oh, you know what's awesome? I don't know if you guys have one of these, but these things are freaking awesome. I don't know if you have one yet.
I don't know what is that.
It's a Garmin.
Oh, yes,
chronograph.
yes. I have seen those. Yes.
Like I had a Lab Radar and I had one of the, like, I don't know if it was Caldwell, but the other chronographs, and like they're all decent, but like they can be a little finicky depending on like lighting for some, and that I don't know what it is with the Lab Radar that I have issues with, but that thing like doesn't miss. Like it records every shot, and it's super easy, and it's like it's this big versus the Lab Radar.
Right.
So it doesn't
what you're
give you. You can't really calculate BC with it though, which for most people doesn't matter because it only gives you your muzzle velocity. It doesn't give you that downrange velocity, so you can't really see
Right.
your velocity degradation at range. But I mean, for most people, that's not really.
Well, what's nice about those, because we have one like that actually, so we have some of the other ones, is when you're shooting a muzzleloader, what happens is it gets confused because random numbers, let's say it's coming out at, I don't know, 2,500 feet per second. Well, you have the Sabbat
Yeah, that's
following
true.
behind it. Sometimes it will catch the
That's
Sabbat
a good point. Yeah.
as it's going through,
Yeah.
and it gets confused. So,
Yeah.
like, You know, like, because we've done it before. Because I had one of the cheap Caldwell ones,
Yeah.
and it would be like whatever random numbers, 25, 1,400. It's like, what happened? You know what I mean? So that, but with those nice ones, like those Garmin's or that caliber, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
You know.
No, they're pretty awesome. So okay, the other thing, and I'll ask you, I don't know if you've looked at this at all, and it may be me because just the way that I am, I'm like super anal about particular things, and I'm like worried about like, oh, what if this happens? And like I'd say at least half of the time it doesn't make any difference, but I still am like worried about it. Is the reason I'm shooting that Hodgdon 4198 H4198 is it's in their extreme line of powder, so it's supposed to be more temp stable than some of the other ones. And I know IMR makes a 4198 as well, and it's not that same line. I know that Hodgdon, I believe, bought IMR, so they own it now. And supposedly they're like the same powder, but I can tell you that when you look at them, they are not the same powder. And then also when I shoot them with the same load of the gun, I get pretty dramatic differences in velocities with the same load. So I stuck with the H41. They're not interchangeable. I have found, at least the two lots I've messed with aren't. And I'm always concerned about that temp stable stuff because I've heard of people with smokeless guns, like in extreme conditions, sometimes having issues with like drops in velocity or just their ignition problems. Particularly like I hunted late season. This is kind of part of how I got like aware of the smokeless thing, but like late season in Iowa, like smokeless muzzleloaders are pretty popular because like you're sitting over like a big open area, and so guys are like shooting further. So that's how I kind of like got like aware of it. And I've heard of guys out there when it's like, you know, like 10, 15 below having issues with like IMR 4198.
I've heard of that too.
Yeah. So have you guys looked into that at all, or is that like a consideration? And like is Vidivori, like I don't even know, is Vidivori considered pretty temp stable like those Hodgdon extreme lines of powder?
Yeah, it's pretty stable, but actually, what's a really good case study that you just mentioned is it all comes down to that recipe, like we were talking. So although hey, they're both 4198, so you know we're throwing out a bunch of numbers here. So for those getting lost in the minutia, these numbers they mean different things. But say just the Vidivori, N110, N120, 133, you know. If you were to pour out some N120 and N110, you'll notice that the granular size of one is smaller than the other. So, you know, what you're going to find is the burn rates and things like that, because of surface area, et cetera, are different. So why that's really important, you know, because the numbers may just sound like random numbers to a lot of people, is, you know, kind of to get back to your initial question, have we looked into it? Really what we have found in shooting and doing all this is, you know, what would you call it? The geometry of the grain, even that matters. You know what I mean? Okay. So when it comes down to that temp stable and all that other stuff, it really matters. Like I shoot 4198 for the same reason. Like if I was to pick one powder, I'd say Hodgdon 4198. Yeah. But the availability, like you said, it's just not as available. And for most people, that N120, and it's also a great product. I'm not saying that one's great and one is okay. They're both great products. But, you know, you're going to find a lot of great consistency, and you're going to get the performance you want out of the Vidivori. But like yourself, it sounds like you're pretty educated in the smokeless and stuff. 4198 would be my go-to as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just curious because, I mean, it is nice to have – well, since I bought so much for me personally, I don't really have to worry about it for at least several years. I was going to say, you have a lot.
Years.
Like, I'm good.
That's
like, I'm
lot
good.
Of 4198.
Have you tested that? Have you tested it yet with super cold stuff or no? Because I know you were talked about potentially doing a late season hunt this year.
Yeah, I have. So
how cold is super cold for you?
Oh, I'd say below zero. I'd consider super cold. Yeah, like or around zero. But the thing that I'm doing that throws a whole nother wrench in all this is I'm not shooting a Sabbat. I'm shooting bullet to bore. And so that makes a whole lot of difference. It makes all these things like the primer and the powder and the fit and the temperature, those all are magnified when you're trying to do that. But if you're shooting a Sabbat, it's way more forgiving. I just in my head got the idea that I want the accuracy, and then I also don't want to worry about putting the bullet in a Sabbat, especially on like a reload, and then going down in, which is, once again, that's just me going like probably overkill with, my stuff. But so, yeah, I have had issues, and that's why I've done a fair amount of experimenting with it to figure out what works the best. But once again, I'm almost handicapping myself when you're doing that. I do have a couple loads now that work really well.
What distance are you shooting that you feel you need bullet to bore?
It's not necessary. Well, I mean, I would say in a lot of places I hunt, like 300 yards happens frequently.
Okay.
I mean, frequently, maybe like I think my gun now, I'd feel pretty comfortable at the 400. I mean, it's definitely like a sub. I mean, it shoots under a half inch, I would say right now. But and I wanted that, and I don't think it's not necessarily a distance thing. I just had it in my head that it's a much more simple. Once again, I'm trying to eliminate variables, what it comes down to, and it's like when you have the Sabbat down, that's another variable. And like, there's lots of plastic that are a little bit different. And like, once again, I know I'm splitting hairs here. Like, I get it. Like for most applications, this is like a non-factor. But I wanted to eliminate
400
that.
yards, this does matter. 400, this matters. You know what I mean?
Well, right. Yeah.
If you were saying 100 yards, I'd be like, dude.
Yeah.
I know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So I'm trying to eliminate as many, so I have to worry about a primer, and actually, I guess a primer module, and then I have to worry about powder, and then a projectile. So like that's 3 things now. 4 with your, that primer module could matter. But anyway, so I'm trying to eliminate them, and I'm trying to get like the most performance out of them. And when you eliminate variables, you make things more simple too, which I like as well. But for most people, to shoot a Sabbat and make it easy on yourself, unless you're trying to get like some crazy performance out of the gun. So.
Well, that's the thing, and kind of getting back to that, the idea that not everything is created equal. Even like the different Sabbats and how they are crushing within the bore is not the same. So like for instance, I actually tested this. So I don't like power belts. I really don't like power belts.
Yeah.
But so if you imagine that skirt at the bottom, so I pushed one through and put it all the way through. Took the breech plug out. This was in my Encore. And pushed it through, and it popped out the end. When you looked at the skirt, rather than kind of collapsing conically, collapse is the right word, but kind of coming in a concentric form, it actually buckled in a V.
Now you have gas escaping through.
Yeah. That is just worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So I tried it a couple times. Not everyone did it, but just knowing that's a possibility. Whereas like, the Harvester Sabbats, or I'm sure other Sabbats are good too, but I've experienced with the Harvester, when you're pushing those through, it is a concentric, I'm sure on a micron level, it's not perfect like you're saying, but you're sub 300 yards, that's going to be fine. I actually know, I know a guy at, in New Hampshire, who he shot one, Lucas Benoit, I believe. Yeah. You guys, Lucas shot one at like 300 using 250 grain, crush, with the Sabbat, no problem.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen, I don't even know where he was that he saw deer that far, but he killed it. So, cool.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. I mean, I think with a Sabbat, you could probably do those types of distance. I mean, it may be better with, bullet to bore, but I think you can still get that.
Your group's going to be better bullet to bore. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think you can still have really good. I mean, I've seen some loads with Sabbats that are like unbelievable too. So those are consistent too. But yeah, I mean, it just depends. Like for the guy that's hunting, mostly in New England, and it probably isn't going to leave. Like, yeah, I mean, a lot of these little details. But like I hunt like Iowa late season. I have some ground in Western New York where I have some bigger, longer shot. Like like I said, I can see flat, long like shots. So I always like have setups that's like, hey, this is a setup for tracking or still hunting. In New England, this is set up for the Midwest or wherever I have to hunt to shoot far. And so like I try to
which makes sense
tailor each one to that. And like the shorter range setup I have now is that Patriot with Blackhorn, particularly because and Iowa Smokes because I want to hunt in mass with it potentially, right? Late season.
Yep.
And so I'm like, well, I don't want to have to set up this gun and then with Smokeless and then make I'm like, no, that's just going to be my Blackhorn gun and that's that. So that's kind of how I've done it. But I'm also like the specialized stuff, so people don't need to do that. Like you can find a really good gun that will do like 95% of what you want to do and like not worry about it. But I just like to geek out and go down the rabbit hole. It's just my personality with gear. So anyway, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So
there's not many like over the counter things that you
No, there's not.
Anyway.
Like I always look at stuff. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I need to modify
You know what's
it.
funny?
Yeah.
I'm basically the same way. I always customize. Basically, everything's a starting point.
Yeah.
Like when I'm getting into different rifles, different gear. Like even like I have a Johnson Woolen Mills green jacket. Like a lot of guys. I have a woman in town by me. She's a seamstress. I have taken that thing apart and put it together again the way I would want it. So like it's all a starting point. So I'm pretty similar as far as like I want my gear to work exactly how I want it to work for me. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, it does matter to an extent. I mean, so I always like, some people don't care about that stuff and they don't pay attention to it. And they're like, yeah, I'll just use whatever, it'll work. And like most of the time it will. But like say you have a weapon failure, okay? And say you hunt over a period of 20 years, okay? You have a weapon failure. That costs you $1. Okay, so $1. All right, in a life, not that big a deal. But then maybe you have like an optic failure or something like, okay, that's another $1, or a sighting, whatever. I guess that could be considered a weapon too. But I'm talking the actual like mechanics of the weapon, whether that's a bow. Usually for people it's a bow. And I think if you are not tuned in with your bow, you'll probably have more than one failure. But say so you have a bow failure, you have a gun failure, say you have a scope failure and it's a 0 thing or whatever. It's not holding 0. I don't know what the reason is. There's a million reasons. So there's $3 over a lifetime. And then maybe you have a gear thing where like you couldn't do what you needed to do because your clothing wasn't right or your boots, whatever, your feet got wet, whatever the reason is, you couldn't stay out as long. Well, then there's another $1. And like when you start to like add these things up, it's like, hey, my wall's looking a lot skinnier than it would have been if like I just paid attention. And I learned that pretty easy early on that like I had a couple of like failures and I'm like, shit, I don't want that to happen. I do all this work and put all this effort to put myself in this position or get myself like there. And then like, I don't capitalize because of this. I'm like, that's not, that starts to add up after 20 years of hunting. I've seen that. So
no, absolutely. I mean, you kind of nailed it. I mean, it sounds like you and I are very similar mindset when it comes to that stuff. I don't want the reason, and this is outside, hunting, trapping, fishing, any of this stuff. If the reason that I didn't get something was either my negligence or inexperience or something that is unacceptable. The reason that I don't get something should be because either I messed up or I should have practiced more. And why that's good is I know myself, I will practice the amount it takes to do it right. So I'm not going to fail. You know what I mean? So like removing those variables, knowing everything is the way it needs to be. In my opinion, you owe it to the animal to do that. You're going to go shoot something.
I think
you
so.
owe it to the animal to be the best out there. You know what I mean? So
no, I totally agree. I think this stuff does matter. Like, and the other thing that I think is just the confidence you get when you control all those variables, and that you're not going to have failure there. So that like it's almost like, hey man, I got no excuse. I gotta execute here. Like I can't blame it on this. I can't blame it on that. Like it's gonna all work. I know my stuff, my gear and everything is where it needs to be. So it's on me now. And it's like, I feel like you get that like, all right, well I have to do it. Like it's me. So that's the last variable is me. And so I need to execute, and then you learn how to execute. But like the other thing I don't love is like when you have something go wrong and you're like, well, was it me or was it the gear? It was like, and you don't know. And now you're like second guessing everything. And I don't like that at all. Like I want to,
at the end, it's like, it was me.
Yeah.
I can accept that.
Yeah.
I'll you know what I mean?
Like, but I hate when it's like, I don't know what the heck went wrong. And then then you can't diagnose the issue and you can't improve on it. And so for me, I'm like, I want to know exactly what went wrong, and I don't want it to ever happen again. And I want to understand why it happened, and I want to understand how I can, prevent it. And so that's like a big thing. And like the other thing, I don't think people consider is like realistically, like what conditions are you hunting in, and what are your opportunities going to be? Because like I said, if I know that I'm going to be hunting in Iowa late season, or maybe my farm in New York, and I'm going to be shooting 200 to 400 yards, like I need to have my weapon optimize for that so that because I'm expecting that opportunity when it comes. It's not like, hey, I sight in for 100. I look at like, you know, I guess you probably, if you haven't gone this far, you know, we have a dope chart, but you're like, oh, I should be like, you know, 14 inches low at 330. And then you're like, yeah, I should be good. And you shoot. Like, you can't expect the outcome to be 100% there. You're like, oh, I'm not really prepared to shoot 330. My gun can do it and I can shoot pretty good. And maybe you get the end, but maybe you don't. Whereas if you're going like, I'm probably going to shoot 400 yards and you prepare for that, and then the deer steps out at 330, like, he's dead. Like, you know, he's dead. That's not an issue anymore. You execute your end of it. Your gear's already prepared, and there you go. The same thing I talk about with archery, where if like I get one opportunity to buck and he's hard quartering too, at 24 yards, like, I'm sending it straight through a scapula and I'm going to get an exit because of my setup. And I know that's what's going to happen. I'm not like, well, I'm going to shoot this, you know, if people want to shoot expandables and light arrows, that's fine. Like, I've shot a ton of deer with them. And they do work in certain situations. And even in that situation, it could work. You could send it and be like, hey, it worked. I got him. But also it could be like, that did not go well. Like, but I know, because I'm prepared and my gear's prepared, and I know my mindset is when I get that opportunity, I need to capitalize on it, and I need to have the gear to allow me to do it. I know that it's going to happen. So I'm confident in it. And it just, like I said, it ends up with, you know, filling more tags and more deer in the freezer and heads on the wall at the end of the day. And that's
the benefit of that kind of mindset as well, is, you know, because a lot of times guys will, I shouldn't say guys, just people are people. And so, hey, something got messed up. And if you don't know your gear, you know, to this extent, it's like, well, maybe the zero's off. Maybe it was the trigger pull. Maybe it was this, and they're blaming everything but themselves.
Right.
I find that a lot, especially with, you see a lot of stuff when you're guiding. Are either of you guides?
No.
No, but like, you know, I meet a lot of people. I meet a lot of different scenarios. I was just saying before the podcast, I just got done turkey hunting, and you know, every year, you know, you get people, and it's like, oh well, my this was off, and my this and my that. And I'm like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, at the end of the day, like, it's okay. You know, the sooner you can admit to yourself, I messed up, the sooner you can fix the problem. You know what I mean? So like, know the gear. And then just be good with it. You know what I mean?
And be
some
honest
people never
with,
will, though.
No, they won't. They won't. They don't want to be accountable and admit that, hey, I failed.
Accountability is a hell of a thing. Huh?
Yeah, I failed, but I rather have that and know it's me. Nothing makes me more mad when I have a legitimate, like, hey, my zero's off, or hey, like that makes, because I'm like, that's just a preparation thing, and that's the easiest stuff. Like, that's the easy part. And I get so mad if I get that drives me crazy. You know, if I have a situation like I had a situation in Canada a few years ago where I missed a pretty big deer with a bow, and
well, you hit it, but the one that ricocheted off.
No, not that one. That was a different one. But
the one you shot over his back.
I shot over his back. I just made a mistake. My bow was fine. It was shooting great. Everything was good. My setup was, and I was confident. I executed the shot well. The thing I didn't do is I had ranged where he was going to go, and I hit a tree line. He was in a field, and it was like tall grass, and I was trying to range like where the. So what had happened is I thought he was along this back edge of this field. So I ranged the trees at the back of the field, like that edge. Well, it turns out he was like 6 or 7 yards in front of it, but I didn't recognize that in the moment. It was like a fast situation. It was a slow situation. The deer was within 30 yards for like 10 minutes, but I didn't have a shot. And then all of a sudden he just like walks off. Like, and I'm thinking I'm going to have all, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, and I'm going, and so like, like I got to get back. I got to, like, it just changed like that. And so I didn't recognize that, hey, he's 7 yards off that tree line. And so I shot him for the distance of the tree line. I shot right over his back. And I was like, oh, but that's a me failure, and I can work on that. Right? Like, my gear it's not a gear thing. It's me. I misjudged that situation, and I can live with that because that's something you can improve on. But like, the gear stuff, to me, that's the easy part because you have all year to perfect that stuff. Like, you got, you know what I mean? Like,
it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of people that, you know, they start deer hunting during deer season. Like, you know, I'm quote unquote deer hunting now.
Yeah.
Like, this is when I'm finding new spots. This is when I'm seeing that, you know, I'm preaching to the choir here, but like, this is when you're seeing the sign from last year because it well, I guess it's a little greened up now. But,
right.
You know, the amount of people that's like, oh, it's deer season, pull out the rifle that, I may or may not test before I bring out in the
Right.
woods and see what happens. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah, I mean it's
but,
like I said, it. I get some people just aren't into it to the same degree, and some people don't have the time. I understand all that. Like so, I'm not like. I guess I'd say I'm pretty understanding of people that are in those circumstances. But if you do care and are into it and do have the time, like don't make excuses. Like get your stuff dialed if it matters to you. Like that is one thing I'll say. I kind of figured out I was pretty young, like probably like early 20s when I figured out that like this stuff matters. I remember I just had some stuff where I was like, what am I doing right now? Like, what was that? Like, what just happened? And I'm like, this isn't going to work. And so, you start to like refine your gear. And, one of that's like the muzzleloader thing. Like I said, trying to dial that in and figure out exactly, what the best gun and load and whatever for the way you hunt. And, like it's the same thing with like a peep sight versus scope. Like that's just another thing. Like optimize it for how you're going to hunt and what you feel comfortable with, what you shoot the best with, all that stuff so that you're familiar with it. And that's not an excuse. You know what I mean? Like if you go tracking and, you're walking through a bunch of snow and you get snow in your scope and like you have a failure because of that. It's like, well, yeah, like that's, you have to be aware of that. You can't just say, oh
right.
shit, I
That's
should
a
have had a
factor.
peep gun. I should have done this or I should. Well, yeah, like that's the situation you're going to go into. So it's hard enough to kill these things, right? When everything is going right. Like, so eliminate all the variables that could go wrong so that it's just you in the moment executing and that's it. Make it, simplify it. So like you don't have to worry about this other stuff. So that's how I kind of approach it.
No,
So
it's crazy. I mean, people get to a level. So, I mean, you must know who the Benoits are, like
Yeah.
Larry Landley. So, like, I know Lanny Benoit pretty well, and so I was talking with him on the phone the other day, and the other day was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
At least doesn't matter. But anyway, he was telling me a story. He was tracking a deer, and he caught up with it when he went to go look through his peep sight. His rear dovetail had slid out of his gun, so he's lined up on the deer as the deer is running, and all he has is a front bead. And he's like, well, the cheek well felt right. He even got to the detail. He's like, in that moment, I knew the cheek well felt right. I could feel my cheek on the thumb where it belonged. So I just put the bead where it would be as if I had my rear sight, drop the deer. So he knew, knowing your equipment so well that even in that scenario, you know it so well to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone needs to get to that level. I'm just saying, like, that level of hunter, even without a proper sight, knew to the detail of how it felt when it touched his skin that he would get it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, the guy that bought his rifle 3 months ago and has put 20 rounds through it and shot, 6 deer in his life. He doesn't get that deer.
Yeah, that's half my moose hunters. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't get that deer, but like, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's just people are, it's like how dedicated are you to it, and what level do you want to go to? So can you talk about any? I think you've a little bit alluded to some of it. What can you talk about? Any of the things coming up, big things for Woodman in the future, or like what if you can talk about it? Go ahead and like just tell everybody what you guys got cooking.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'll mention, I'll allude to some stuff, not too much details, but we do have other rifles we're designing that will be coming out. And I didn't say another rifle. I said rifles, multiple.
Yep.
We're working on several. And as far as the Patriots go, we are almost done with a very, very high-end synthetic option. We're going to be working with a company that does carbon fiber impregnated synthetic, so it's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be, just like a hunk of plastic that you get on any unit. Like, it's going to be nice. And those are going to be coming out soon. We're working with that molding company now. You should see that fairly soon. And also why that's a big deal is, I'm sure anyone who's looked into Woodman Arms, the only downside of Woodman Arms right now is our lead times are fairly long.
Yeah.
Well, the big reason that is it's the fit and finish. I'm not sure if anyone's following us on Facebook or Instagram. I've been trying to hire someone to help us with the wood process, but it's a craftsmanship position. The synthetics, there's no fit and finish. It's take them out of the box from the manufacturer we get them from, throw them on the frame, and out the door it goes. So that lead time will be drastically less.
Yeah.
So for a lot of guys who's like, hey, I want to get one of your rifles, get one of the nice synthetics. If you want to get nice wood, you can order that nice wood external, but still get your rifle quicker. I'm not sure. I don't want to say a number of how much quicker because we haven't evaluated, but just, we're going to be able to put the stocks on and ship them out. So you'll be seeing that very soon too.
Are you going to see another reduction in weight because of that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
A pretty significant one. It's already 5.5 pounds. It's already 5.5 pounds.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I don't even know that that's necessary, but I don't know.
Yeah,
some people might be getting some sore shoulders with those smokeless loads when they start putting those stocks on the gun.
Yep.
That's pretty fun.
So I mean, it's already 5.5 pounds. So it's it's going to reduce you. So guys who are tracking, mountaineering, do that kind of stuff. I mean, you're really. I mean, it's already at 5.5. It's an absolute gem to carry.
I know that. I think that they call it the shank. What's that? It's basically a chamber. You're talking the one Patriot has it's like 2 inches and the other's 3.5 or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Do you call that the shank? Yep. Is that what you guys?
Yep, that's shank diameter. Yep.
So obviously you added more material to the shank on the G3, but you have a shorter barrel. Is the barrel lighter or the same, or like how does that equate from one to the other?
So another
weight.
thing you'll notice on a G2 versus a G3 is the G2 actually goes from a receiver to what's called a barrel block, and that barrel block is connected to the barrel. Now it just goes from receiver to barrel. And so that block in between is actually removed. I'm not sure how to describe it in a way for your listeners that the best way is to look up a.
I'm gonna go grab my old one because I feel like I should have done this 10 times. Oh, you got it. Okay, so.
No, this is the new one. So,
okay.
So if you have your old one, actually go get your old one.
Yeah, hold on
it's
one
right
second.
There. It's readily available.
It's literally.
Perfect.
All right.
Oh. Knocking stuff over.
That sounded expensive.
No.
What did you just break?
An Amazon light, that's all.
Oh, I heard a crash and a shatter.
All right, so let me look at what you got there.
So give me one of these with yours.
Oh.
So what you'll notice, so you see my receiver here?
Yep.
And then it goes right to the barrel. Yours has a receiver, and then you have
this portion right
block.
here is what you're talking.
That's your barrel block, and then that goes to the barrel. And so by removing that and then adding that weight, so you can see this is the before the taper, where yours is probably about that before your taper starts. So we're talking probably 2 inches versus 3+ inches.
Oh yeah, it's
significant.
Oh, that's a big. I didn't even realize that is a big. So that's a total redesign. I didn't realize that.
Yes,
I didn't realize that was different. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, he wouldn't have needed an engineer if all he did was a couple things like
no, yeah.
That's it's a pretty significant increase.
Yeah, it is
in order to withstand those.
Yeah,
pressures.
I mean, I'd say that's maybe 2 inches.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
maybe 2 inches.
If I remember correctly, I think it's actually 1 3/4.
That's what I would say by looking at it. I'd say it's an inch. Okay, that's interesting.
So
is the barrel then on your what is the barrel length on the G3, or do you have multiple barrel lengths?
24. 24. Well, we have multiple. We have 22, 24, and 26.
Okay, so you still have so like with the longer, I guess, and thicker shank diameter, or I guess wall thickness, really, is that barrel much heavier than the G2 barrel then in the same length, or is it the same, or is it lighter?
It's almost it's so close that we just say it's still 5.5 pounds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
I want to say it's like 1.3 ounces heavier.
Okay.
Like it's a little heavier, but I think of it the same way, like guys who do like Tour de France and stuff like that. Like there'll be guys who, maybe not Tour de France, they're actually really good, but guys who bike and they're like, oh, I need carbon fiber screws. It's like, or you could go pee before you go and you'll lose the same amount of weight. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's negligible enough. You're not going to notice.
Okay, so then if someone got a G3 with a 22-inch barrel, and then they put the carbon fiber stock, like that's actually like starting to not be like, hey, I could pee and lose that. That's like starting to be pretty significant. Like you got to be approaching 5 pounds then, I would imagine, or like.
Yeah, you'll see.
Yeah.
Because because it is carbon. It's carbon fiber impregnated synthetic.
Yeah.
So it's not all carbon fiber.
Okay.
So it's it's not just that, but we'll see what happens long term with that too. But it's most certainly lighter.
Heck, even if it wasn't any, it's not like it needs to get that much lighter. Like there's not many rifles that are. I mean, I don't even know if anybody makes like an actual shootable rifle that's like sub 5 pounds. I don't know. Like even those like Kimber mountain rifles are like I think 5 pounds or like around there, or maybe something like that.
I can think of one. And it's a great rifle, but it almost looks like a youth model, but the length of pull is longer.
Yeah.
But either way, that's the only one I can think of, and it's a small shop from it's down south somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
But I met him actually at that Great American Outdoor Show, and his big thing was he was the only one doing that, and I didn't research it, but I mean he's the only guy I've ever seen doing stuff.
I think
like
I
that.
need to shoot my muzzleloader. Because it's still the barrel's still taped, so I think that there's still one in there from the season.
Dude, I did that this year.
Did you really?
Yeah, I almost double loaded it. That would have been.
I think it's. Yep, I'll bring that.
I mean,
next
if it's
time
taped,
we go
it's
to the
probably
range.
loaded.
I was just. I usually always will just like run a patch through it before anyway.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I was like in a rush and I just like grabbed it. Something in the back of my head, I was just like, nope. Took the breech plug out, powder fell out. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Dude,
so I'll never do that
witness
again.
mark on your ramrod is your best friend.
Yeah.
That is so easy to do. And like, then like this is, this material is called Delrin. It's extremely flexible.
Yeah.
You can mark it, whatever. But like, also, have you ever seen one of these Spin Jag?
Yeah.
These are fun. If you don't have one,
Yep.
you should.
Yeah, I got
we
one,
offer them. They're phenomenal. They really are. They reduce the effort to load your muzzleloader by a lot as well. But it's
so okay. That's pretty cool. So, well, I think the questions I am going to ask, you're not going to be able to answer. So I just won't ask them.
That good, huh?
I just won't ask them. We won't even tease it. Like,
So worst you can worst case scenario, I say. No.
Well, I think
he just wants to know what you got going.
Yeah, I just am always like, oh, you guys
just gonna keep
this.
poking.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep. It'll never end, and you're like, all right, I can't tell you that. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah, you want to see behind that beaver fur.
Oh, I definitely do.
Yeah.
I was hoping we'd have a little earthquake and it would just fall off, and then it would screenshot it real quick and like,
no.
Got it. Well, cool. Do you have anything else that you want to touch on? Well, you're here.
No, I mean, just thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
For anyone who hasn't, please go on our on our Instagram and our Facebook, Woodman Arms, both of them. I'm John _LaMarca on Instagram, or just John LaMarca on Facebook, and we're constantly posting pictures. Again, I run the social media. Please, as you're using our firearms, send that stuff to me so I can use it on our website, and I'll tag you guys in it if you want. And just thank you everyone for using the rifles. It's kind of cool whether I'm hunting and shooting something that that I designed the rifle, or it's so cool all of my friends and people who are in this passion the same and think the same as me sending me pictures. Hey, I got my deer, I got my bear, I got my elk, I got whatever, and it's a picture of something that I've had my hands, we've had our hands in developing. It's such a different level of I equate it to almost like, it's not the same, and my boys have not done this yet, but that proud father moment when like your kid does something, shoots a turkey, whatever that.
Yeah.
Like having friends that use a gun that you make all in the USA, designed from scratch, whatever, to be successful. I love that stuff. I never get sick of it. So tell me your stories, send me your pictures, because I want to hear them.
Absolutely. That's definitely that hits a little different.
It does.
And I guess I'll say the thing that I think is really cool about your company is first off, it's a local company. It's American made. And not only America, it's made right here where, I live in my state.
Yep.
And if you're local, that's really cool. And you guys are always, you can see from this conversation, you're trying to improve on stuff and innovate, which is really cool. I can appreciate that. I don't want to say hate, but like so much of, and you got to have a little bit of it. So much of, I think the hunting industry and the products are driven by like, hey, what's this consumer going to buy and how many of these can we sell? And we get it in a big box store and like, how can we maximize our margins and our profits and all that stuff? And like, I understand as a business, I own a business and, run them like that is important obviously, but it's nice to see companies that are, innovating maybe with that as a back burner consideration rather than like at the forefront, like driving every decision. Because like you said, this is not like a super cheap gun. I don't think it's unreasonable at all. Like on the price, I'll say that. Like it's, I don't think
it's about $1,000. As of right now, it's about $1,000. And
yeah.
Any stainless steel,
yeah.
This other stuff, all these features, you're not gonna. Most of them are more than that, honestly. So,
but you guys are, you're trying to make a better mousetrap, and you're not like letting, I guess, sales numbers, from what I can tell, and like, trying to sell as many as you can. You're not letting that drive the engineering and design of these, which I think is
correct.
That's what I like. I like products that are brought to the market that way, rather than like, okay, let's see how many of these we can sell and how much we can make. Let's like, oh no, I want to make the best solution possible for this problem. And yeah, obviously cost is always a consideration, but it's not the number one, driving factor on how we design things. So
no, very performance driven. We want to know, we ship this gun out and you use it, or as the end user, you receive it. We know that thing is going to perform because we make sure it will.
Well, thanks for coming on. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I do. I like to sometimes geek out on this type of stuff. So hopefully you guys, hopefully you
made it this far.
Hopefully you follow along. And like, if you have questions, I'm sure you can send them to Woodman, or if you have questions specific for me, send them and we can do our best to answer them. But like I said, once again, when we're talking about this stuff, we're kind of talking fast about numbers and stuff like that, and we're kind of getting into the technical side and down the weeds. If you have questions, like this is serious, like it could potentially be dangerous. Like if you aren't confident in what you're doing, reach out to somebody here. Like probably you're the best one, but even if you want to reach out to me about a specific question, reach out. But like don't mess around until you feel comfortable and you like have a pretty good level of understanding of how this stuff works and what you're doing, because it can be dangerous. But other than that, like it's good stuff. So
follow the recipes and you'll be fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys, we will see you on the next one.